What's up YouTube? TeamHitokiri here and bringing you another video. Today I'm going to be doing one on the Mermail deck. It's not going to be a deck profile, it's actually going to be side decking information, tips, like what I side with the deck, how I side the cards out, what I side against certain matchups, so on and so forth. So, the reason for this, I guess, is a lot of people lately have been messaging me and asking me, how do you side with this deck? What do you side out against this? What should I do when I'm preparing to fight this? So, I've been getting asked all these questions, and I think I'm going to provide some answers, or some some insight into this. That's my cool little background. Anyways. Now, let us get down to the side deck. Okay, the side deck I'm currently playing for this is right here. It's 3 Max C's. Alrighty. Now, the reason for Max C is because it's a very powerful card against quite a number of decks, but mostly used against the dragon matchup, so the dragon rulers, and against a Mermail mirror match. It's a really strong card in the mirror match, but the dragon rulers is really where it hits home. It could also hit some rogue decks like 6 Samurais, X Sabers, and I guess Katakuris, machines, gadgets, stuff like that, Machinas, Dirgias. So it's a really well-rounded card, and with this deck, getting the extra draw power is also always very beneficial. Now, when side decking in a Max C, you just have to, I guess, look at the kind of cards that you don't really need to draw into, or cards that you're not going to really need so much in the matchup, depending on also other cards that you side in. So, if I was just going to side in Max Cs, then let's say if I was fighting against Katakuris, and there's nothing else in my side deck, sadly, that couldn't stop the deck, so it's okay, I'll just side in my Max Cs. Now, just think to yourself, now, what in my deck isn't going to be that big of a deal against Katakuris? Well, I would say that something like 3 infantry wouldn't be that necessary, since I have Max C sighting and I still have Valor in the deck and Breakthrough Skill, so I can stop combos. So I'd probably take out an infantry for one of these. Infantry is a very common card you can side out in this deck against any matchup, where it's not that big of a deal or much of a necessity as other cards. Same with Abyss Pike. Abyss Pike is a very common card you can side out in a lot of decks, against a lot of decks, especially if you're playing 3 of them. I'm currently only playing 2 because I went to playing 1 Turge again. You could also, I side out a Lind quite often, because there's some decks where, especially if you're not going first, there's honestly no point in having 3 of them in the deck, because you're not going to have the turn to set up by setting one, so just drawing them later on is kind of pointless. And generally, you're going to be using the Abyss Spheres to bring out level 7 monsters, so the Abyss Linds aren't going to be that big of a deal for the deck, so I would side them out for something like the Max C. Also, if you're siding in other cards, you could also take out a Teus, or maybe 2 Teus, or all 3 Teus if you really needed to. Usually I side out a Teus, a Pike, take out a Stream, or a Tidal. I've actually taken out a Megalo one time, but that was just against a really random deck that I just didn't need that against, because I wanted some extra side deck cards in. But yeah, Max C, it's all, I guess, preference about cards that you feel you don't really need to have 3 of, or you don't need to draw that much of. Diva is also a very popular choice you could side out. You could side out 1, 2, or all 3 at some points, but I would just side out 1. Two other cards I'm playing in my set deck right now, which are Electric Virus. The purpose of this card is because it can take machines and dragons, so it hits a lot of matches, a lot of matchups, a lot of monsters in both top-tier decks, mid-tier decks, and rogue decks. So you could stop the Dragon Rulers, stop Dragosacks, and you could stop Ophions and Bahamets and Ouroboros, and you could stop all the other machine decks and everything. So he's a really good card. Again, it's like Max C. You just want to side with hand traps. You don't want to have too many in your deck, especially with Mermails, because throwing off the water ratios will fuck everything up. So you want to make sure that you aren't messing up the water monster ratio. Also, you want to make sure you're keeping a good amount of level 7s and a good number of those for making the combos. So you could first turn do a Dragosack or a Big Eye if you went second, or if you need to make like Gaios or something. You want to make the rank 7s more than doing anything else with this deck. Alright, so Electrovite, I guess is pretty self-explanatory. Next up is 3 Mystical Space. Now, the reason for this is because it's not needed in the main deck for this deck at all. You have infantry and marksman that's going to be doing plenty of destruction for you, so there's no need for this. Now, it's definitely a great card to side into because a lot of decks will side into D-Fissure, Imperial Iron, well, not Imperial Iron Wall. Well, yeah, people do side Imperial Iron Wall, but against this deck like Macro, D-Fissure, Goes in Match, Rivalry of the Warlords, tons of stuff like that. So you're always going to be wanting to have like Mystical Space, I think. And there's a bunch of other decks too, like rogue decks, you know, have like field spells, and there's deck like Evil Storms have a shitload of back row, so you can take out all that kind of stuff. So Mystical Space, generally I will side out something like my Book of Moon or my Dark Hole, or maybe even my Heavy Storm, because I'm just gonna put in single destruction cards, so I don't have to worry about blowing up any of my back rows. So Heavy Storm is actually a common card I side out. Same with Dark Hole, because Dark Hole is not necessary all the time. So you have infantries and marksmen to blow stuff up. Alrighty. Next up is a Messenger of Peace. I'm not gonna play this anymore. I'm gonna move on to either a Goes in Match or a Penguin Soldier. But this is a very good option for some decks with Mermails. Give you some protection, some time to respond, to rebuild your hand. So it's a good side deck card, but it's not that big of a deal. Dust Tornado is a very good option for this deck. You can play 1, 2, or 3 of this card. Like MST, it's very easy to side into. So you would just take out your like a power card like Heavy Storm or Dark Hole, because you're not really going to need it, especially if you're going second. I mean, going first. If you're going second, you really want to have Heavy Storm in your deck. But if you're going first, you don't really need it. You want to have setup cards like with Dusters and Mystical Space. I'm playing one of these right now. It's a really good card. You can side in against a lot of decks, especially Evil Swarms or Rogue decks. You could also, I would definitely side this and MSTs in against like Prophecies and maybe Dragons if they have. They're going to side into Royal Decrees or something. So it's always a really good card to have. Eradicators, I would play 3 of these. I only have 2 right now, but I'm going to put a 3rd one in. This is a very powerful card. It's very easy to make Big Eye. And you can put Thought Ruler in this deck too. He's very easy to get to, so that's another chance for you to use Eradicator. This is really generally, I guess, only going to be siding in against the Prophecy matchup. So I guess when you're going to be siding into this card, you want to take out cards that aren't going to be doing like a lot against that matchup specifically. So stuff like Dark Hole and Heavy Storms. They have a lot of like chainable cards like Fate, Wabaku, Threatening Roar, and you don't really need to blow up that field spell. Pike's a pretty good side out for that one because they have Kaiko. Marksman and maybe an infantry you could side out. Maybe a Tias, but I would definitely leave in like the Dragon Engine, because you want those to go off. You want to go off first with those. They're pretty good. Even if you side Imperial Iron Wall, you're still going to want those in the deck. Like, they're really good. So Eradicator, it's pretty easy to side into. And then the Iron Walls, all depends if you want to put the 3 in. 3, it's just, I guess, with the deck, it all depends on how many of each card of the water type you are comfortable playing, you know. You don't want to screw up the ratios too much with the deck, so I guess you just got to play with moving around different kind of cards. But there's some cards that aren't going to shine a whole lot against certain things. Now, some other side deck options to explore that are pretty good is Solemn Warning. I actually want to fit this in the main deck itself. This is a pretty good card. People don't expect it in Mermail, so it's really nice to have. And um, against pretty much anything. But this is really good against Evil Swarms mostly. Goes in match, just a really good card against the Dragon match, and also if you're playing against rogue decks, you know, that are attribute type, or are more than one attribute type. So goes in match has its potential since you have a lot of water stuff you can go into, but it's not the strongest. It's not the best option for this one, but it's still a good card. It stops prophecies too, so it's really easy to side into as well. Another option is Penguin Soldier. Penguin Soldier is actually low key, like pretty good. It's a level 2, so it helps out some synchroing stuff. You could add it back to your hand with Turge. People will mistake it for a Lind. So I'm losing my voice. I'm talking way too much today. But oh my gosh, against Evil Swarm, this card is really good against that deck, because there's nothing in their deck unless they play Forbidden Chalice. There's nothing they can do to stop a Penguin Soldier, so Ophion's gonna go bye bye. So a card like this, you could side 1 or 2. Again, I guess when it comes down to the deck itself, like things like you could also side out Veilers too. Like if you don't specifically need them against a certain deck. Same with Breakthrough Skill. Sometimes I'll side out Abyss Sphere if I don't really need it. But generally, the cards that I've side out with this deck is Pike, Diva, Turge, Mulan Glacia all the time. I always side out Mulan Glacia after game 1 every time. I side out Veiler occasionally. I side out Tias occasionally. I side out the Tidals quite often. I side out the Stream pretty much all the time. I usually will side out 1 Lind, sometimes 2. I've done that before, but 1 I usually always side out 1. TS occasionally, Infantry and Marksman occasionally. Very rarely though do I side out a Marksman, but I side out an Infantry quite often. So against, you know, Prophecies, I mean, really good cards against them is going to be something like Goes in Match, Imperial Iron Wall, Eradicators, Duster, MST, Fiendish Chain. Oh yeah, Fiendish Chains. I've seen people side those with the deck too. Those are really good. Not against Prophecies. It's not that big of a deal because they have Wisdom. But against Dragons, this card's really good. Against Rogue decks, it's pretty alright. Against Mermails, this card's really strong against Mermails. But against Evil Swarms, this is pretty crap. Against Evil Swarms, you want to side into something like Imperial Iron Wall to stop Kirkion. You can side Penguin Soldiers. You can side Warning, Electric Virus, Mystical Space, Dust Tornado, Messenger of Peace. And then against Dragons, you can do Penguin Soldier, Warning, Goes in Match. You could do Imperial Iron Wall, MST, Duster, Electric Virus, Max C, Fiendish Chain. You know, there's so many options you could go into against that deck. But I'd say the strongest would be like the two Virus, 3 Max Cs, 2 MST, 1 Duster, 3 Iron Walls, and then the Warning. Goes in Match if you play those. Like, those are all really strong ones. The rest of them, it's just like, yeah, it could be there. You can honestly side this entire side deck against Dragons and be pretty good. Even Eradicator. But yeah, against, I guess that's it. I mean, actually against Mermails, Warning's really good against Mermails. Eradicators, alright. It's not that big of a deal. It depends on if they're playing a more spell-heavy version like the Lances, but it's very rare. Imperial Iron Wall is not that big of a deal against that deck. Duster and MST, you could side those in because if you can predict these spheres correctly and you hold on to the MST during your end phase and they activate in the main phase 2, or you want not to do their trick, you can just MST it because maybe they think you set the MST or something. I don't know, but you could always do that. Duster's really good if you're already setting up and they were going to set like a Break the Skill or a Fiendish Chain or something. It's really good, and you could set a sphere during the end of their turn. You could activate during your turn. Max C, you definitely want to side in against Mermails all the time. It's a very good card to side into. Messenger at Peace is pretty good too. Penguin Soldier, not that big of a deal. You don't really want to send stuff back to the hand with this deck. And then the Fiendish Chain is pretty freaking good against Mermails. But yeah, I mean, that's really it, to be honest. Like, I don't know. I mean, there's not really much else we could really say.